Welcome back to Atomic News, monitoring global chaos so you don't have to. After Israel and the United States eliminated a significant part of Iran's military and political top tier, Tehran did not collapse. It did not go silent, and it definitely did not ask for mercy. Instead, the IRGC kept issuing threats, warning that Iran's enemies would not be safe anywhere in the world. Then Iran raised the stakes even further by launching 2 ballistic missiles toward Diego Garcia, the joint US-British base in the Indian Ocean. The missiles failed to hit the target, but that almost misses the point. Diego Garcia sits more than 4,000 kilometers away from Iran. So the real message here was not accuracy, it was reach. Even after a major decapitation strike, the regime is still capable of threatening strategic Western infrastructure at very long range. And that says something important about how the Iranian system works. This is the strength of a theocratic regime. It does not depend on one elegant chain of command, one mastermind, or one planning room. When the only grand strategy is jihad, you do not need endless layers of creative planning. You need continuity, fanatics, and a machine that keeps moving after losing pieces. Iran took a heavy blow, but it did not break. NATO's withdrawal of its Iraq mission staff to Europe looks completely logical. This is not a combat force, it is an advisory mission. But that is exactly why the move matters. If even non-combat Western structures no longer want to stay in Iraq during this phase of the war, that tells you how unstable the environment has become. And the logic is simple. Iranian proxies and underground networks in the region have already shown they can threaten Western positions with drones and rockets. In that situation, keeping advisory personnel inside Iraq starts looking less like commitment and more like stupidity. At this point, I am honestly tired of trying to interpret Trump's statements, so I will simply pass this stream of consciousness onto you as is, and you can look for logic in it if you want. I personally doubt that is possible. Trump said the United States does not really use the Strait of Hormuz, so the countries that actually need it should be the ones protecting it. He added that America could help if asked, while also saying the U.S. is already very close to achieving its objectives. So there it is. That is the statement. Interpret it however you like. Now to Belarus. The U.S. agreed to ease part of its sanctions pressure after talks in Minsk, and in return, Lukashenko released 250 political prisoners. It is a beautiful strategy in the most disgusting possible sense. First, you take people hostage. Then, you exchange them for sanctions relief, diplomatic access, and economic benefits. Now, to be fair, pulling Belarus away from Moscow could be useful. Lukashenko has always had a reputation as a man who likes sitting on 2 chairs at once. But after the Belarus protests were crushed, not without Russian backing, his room for maneuver got much smaller. So yes, in theory, distancing Minsk from Moscow may help. In practice, it still looks like Putin is holding Lukashenko by the balls much tighter than Trump is trying to tickle them. Then comes one of the most cynical stories of the day. According to reports, Moscow proposed a bargain to Washington. Russia would stop sharing intelligence with Iran on American targets if the United States stopped sharing intelligence with Ukraine on Russian targets. Washington rejected the proposal, and that is good, because the Americans seem to understand something very simple here. The damage Russian forces suffer from U.S. intelligence passed to Ukraine is far greater than the damage Iran can inflict on the U.S. thanks to Russian intelligence support. In plain language, this was a terrible trade for Washington and a very revealing one for Moscow. Russia was once again trying to use Ukraine as a chip in a bigger geopolitical game. Ukraine has been conducting counteroffensive actions for roughly a month and a half, at least since late January. These actions have unfolded largely in information silence. Independent mappers like Deep State and Blackbird show only part of the picture, often with a delay, because the modern battlefield no longer looks like a clean line on a map. Positions are stretched, mixed, hidden in tree lines, basements and ruins. Logistics hides from drones. Kill zones run for many kilometers. The very idea of a front line is getting blurrier by the week. Kupiansk in Kharkiv Oblast is a good example of what that means in practice. Back on March 12th, Ukrainian officials were already saying that isolated Russian groups remained trapped inside the city and could not operate effectively. Then on March 20th, even Russian channels started whining that the garrison around the Central District Hospital had effectively been finished off. So, on a map, this can still look like a torn gray patch. In reality, it may mean just a few isolated basements where the remnants of a force are waiting to die. And only after weeks of Ukrainian counterpressure did Russia begin trying to launch what it calls its spring-summer offensive. According to commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces Robert Magyar Bravedy and the 3rd Army Corps, the weather shift on March 17th and 18th pushed Russian forces into renewed assault attempts under cover of fog and drizzle on the stretch from Rodinska to Huliaipole that turned into a slaughter. More than 900 Russian troops were killed or wounded in a day and a half, and not a single sector was broken through. And the most absurd detail of this entire assault circus is that, according to Magyar, the Russians attacked not only with infantry, armor, motorcycles, buggies, and quad bikes, but in some cases, even with horses. In 2026, then on March 19th, on the Lyman-Borova axis, Russian forces launched what the 3rd Army Corps described as the biggest mechanized breakthrough attempt there in a long time. They attacked on 7 directions at once, using more than 500 infantry, 28 armored vehicles, and over 100 motorcycles and similar light vehicles. And before they even reached the line of battle, the assault started falling apart under drones, artillery, and prepared defenses. According to the corps, the attack failed completely. No positions taken, no settlements captured, just wreckage. And now stop for a second and look at the numbers. From March 17th through March 20th, Russia lost 6,080 troops killed and wounded. 6,080 in 4 days. And when you think about this number, you think about well-organized modern armies. The number of wounded is usually much higher than the number of killed, because casualties are stabilized, evacuated, and brought back. Russia fights differently. On a battlefield dominated by drones, where men are hit on the approach, where evacuation routes are exposed, and where commanders keep feeding bodies into kill zones, the ratio can become much harsher. In the failed assault in the 3rd Army Corps sector, for example, 405 Russian casualties included 288 irreversible losses and only 117 sanitary losses. In that battle, the dead outnumbered the wounded by more than 2 to 1. So when we say Russia lost more than 6,000 men in 4 days, we're not talking about some abstract statistic. We may very well be talking about thousands of corpses, thousands, and all of it for almost nothing. For comparison, Ukrainian official figures describe a much better overall killed-to-wounded picture, approximately 1 to 6 to 1 to 8, reflecting a stronger medical and evacuation system. A large share of wounded personnel return to service, and robotic ground systems are increasingly used for evacuation under fire. And as if the ground losses were not enough, Russia also got a brutal reminder of what modern war is doing to its army aviation. On March 20th, operators from Ukraine's 59th Brigade hit a Russian K-52 Alligator attack helicopter with a fiber-optic FPV drone. The helicopter made an emergency landing, was then finished off, and according to Ukrainian reporting, the crew was eliminated as well. And then, by the morning of March 21st, Z channels were already whining about yet another lost helicopter. Another KF-52. One crew member reportedly died, and this is not even the first time helicopters have been hit by FPV drones. It is part of a broader pattern now, not some one-off miracle. The video makes the first loss even more humiliating. The helicopters appear to be attacking in a lofted profile, basically tossing unguided rockets in a ballistic arc from a distance in order to avoid deeper exposure. This is an old, inaccurate, low-efficiency tactic, a kind of flying grad launcher for people too scared to do real close air support. And even that did not save them. Then, right on cue, enters Fighter Bomber. Fighter Bomber is one of the best-known Russian Z military aviation bloggers, closely tied to the world of Russian aerospace forces and army aviation. He is often treated as a semi-official voice of Russian pilots and helicopter crews, because he leaks their losses, moods, and technical failures faster than Moscow admits them. After this episode, he wrote, "Morning is not good. We lost another machine." Then it gets even better. He says crews are already improvising their own anti-drone warfare, carrying drone detectors, and on my 8s even shotguns, often bought with private money or helped by volunteers, while Russian industry still has no proper solution, which makes the whole thing even funnier. It is not even clear what exactly they think all those improvised EW gadgets are supposed to do when the helicopter was hit by a fiber optic FPV drone. EW means nothing to a drone that does not care about jamming. So this is not just whining, it is a technical confession of weakness. Russian Army aviation is discovering that in modern war, $1 million helicopter can be hunted down by something connected to a spool of fiber optic cable and a few kilograms of hatred. And finally, one more thing that matters just as much as the battlefield in Ukraine. The FBI and CISA have now issued a warning that cyber actors linked to Russian intelligence are targeting users of Signal and other messaging apps through phishing and social engineering. According to the U.S. warning, thousands of accounts have already been compromised, including those of officials, military personnel, politicians, and journalists. The key point is that Signal itself was not broken. The Russians are not defeating encryption, they are defeating people, and that is exactly why this matters. This is not some isolated cyber incident. It is part of the same hybrid war Russia has been waging for years. While Russia keeps feeding men into a meat grinder at the front, its methods in the shadows are often far more efficient and far more successful. This is the other side of the Russian war machine. GRU-linked killers and sabotage teams, networks of agents across Europe, arson attacks, explosions, cyber operations, suspected sabotage against undersea cables in the Baltic, drone incursions around airports and military bases, and exploding parcel plots aimed at transport networks. European governments, NATO officials, and investigators have repeatedly tied Russia or Russian-linked operatives to this broader campaign. That is why Russia's hybrid warfare is often more dangerous than its conventional warfare. On the battlefield, it burns men and armor in absurd quantities. In the shadows, it is patient, cheap, deniable, and often effective. And the real problem is that Europe and the United States still underestimate this side of the threat. They still underreact. They still treat too many of these attacks as disconnected incidents instead of recognizing them as parts of one long coordinated campaign. That is a mistake, and the price will be high. This is Professor Nuke, and this was Atomic News. Stay alert.
Stay tuned for all the wondrous views. You're watching Atomic News.